Welcome back. Now, the Rand has ranked among the 5 best performing emerging market currencies of 2024. This relative resilience aided by rising investment levels, low inflation and structural reforms. But the big question is, will we see the same kind of upbeat momentum moving into 2025? Investec's Annabel Bishop joins us now with further analysis. Annabel, thanks so much for your time today. So the local unit having a fairly good year in 2024, particularly in the second half as sentiment improved post the national election. We've also had lower interest rates and lower inflation, as well as constant energy supply. Right at the top, let's just unpack the Rand's performance in 2024.
Yes, hi, thank you. Look, I think, relatively speaking, the Rand's had a good year compared to recent years of performance, and that's actually shown in inflation as well. Rand strength helps to moderate inflation, and of course, inflation dropped down to 2.8% in October, below the 3 to 6% inflation target range, and of course, the 4.5% midpoint of that range. So, the important point here is that when the Rand sees strength against the dollar, it actually helps for petrol price cuts, for example. And of course, as well, if we look at other imported commodities as well, which are all US dollar based. So all of these factors are really important for South Africa. Then, of course, at the end of the year, as you said, we did have a bit of weakness. And of course, that's really now on the incoming Trump administration. So, of course, on the 20th of January, President-elect Trump actually becomes the president of the United States again. And that's quite important for global financial markets, for economies, for the US economy itself, as there's an expectation that there will be higher inflation. In fact, the Central Bank of America, the Federal Reserve banks actually revised upwards their inflation forecasts. And as a consequence, markets have factored out some interest rate cuts that were anticipated for this year. And that's the key reason why we've seen US dollar strength in the past few weeks. And of course, Rand weakness against that. But let's not forget, the Rand is very volatile. And of course, we've seen some volatility this week. The Rand strengthened again. So, that's really where we do find ourselves with the currency.
And I want to touch on, those international factors in a sense where how much of a driving factor are local factors when it comes to the Rand's performance. Of course, I ask this because it really seems like it's always relative to dollar strength or dollar weakness.
And I think that's the key point. When we look at the Rand against the US dollar, that's exactly right. And of course, the dollar expected to see strength, both because of policies in the United States, but also some uncertainty as well in financial markets. Against the other crosses, if you look at the Rand against the pound, the Rand against the euro, other currencies, the Rand has seen less volatility. I think what's really important for us, however, is events in the United States. And that's not just because global commodities are priced in US dollars, and therefore we have to basically pay US dollars to import oil and petroleum products, as we don't have our own essentially in South Africa. So this really places us in a situation where it has a direct impact on inflation as well. And that's why the Rand is so important against the US dollar for us, as we know that in turn impacts interest rates, GDP growth, employment, etc. So, what really happens is that political events in the US, or of course economic events, financial market events, policy changes, all of those are scrutinized by financial markets, often factored in ahead of time. Yes, events in South Africa do have some impact on the Rand, but it's really major events. And of course, as you said, it was the formation of the Government of National Unity, a centrist government, acceptable to global financial markets and of course investors in South Africa, which is seen to promote economic growth and of course the continuation of the government business collaboration that has delivered the end to load shedding and of course improvements at Transnet and other areas. So that work's not done with the government business collaboration. That's why we need it to persist. We need the Government of National Unity. That work's going to carry on for a few years. It takes a lot of effort to unpack and solve the issues at Transnet. But to answer your question, with more events happening in the US and having a very large impact, that's unfortunately the big driver.
Let's look at how the Rand then fares amongst its emerging market peers. We just touched on the top that it was one of the top 5 emerging market currencies last year, and this is the first time it's achieved this since 2016.
And Financial market players, investors were very concerned about what would happen after South Africa's elections.
Yeah.
Of course, the possibility of the ANC, still the biggest political party in South Africa, but of course at one time, having the majority of the vote, the prospect of the ANC obviously moving into left-wing territory if it were to join up in coalition with a left-wing party, for obvious reasons, worried business and of course financial markets. Now with the centrist government, the government of national unity, where any party may join, but of course, mainly run by the ANC and the DA, given that they are the two largest political parties in South Africa, caused some calm for financial market investors. What's really important here, though, looking at the emerging market spectrum, is that we do find ourselves in a situation where we obviously have experienced great strength last year, not just from the formation of the GNU, but also, of course, as well, that the United States entered an interest rate cutting cycle. When we move into a US interest rate cutting cycle, money tends to flow into emerging market economies. It tends to strengthen emerging market currencies. And that's where we found ourselves as well. Now, as we move into 2025, the factors I mentioned earlier, that there are now expected to be fewer interest rate cuts in the US than previously anticipated, that now is expected to result in fewer global financial flows into the EMs. So in other words, there'll be less purchases of bonds and equities of emerging market economies, less portfolio inflows, and of course that means less strength for emerging market currencies. Now the rand tends to be a significant beneficiary of these EM flows when it is seen to have a stable government, when it's seen to have market-friendly policies, and of course the GNU has underscored that, and of course when the situation is now one that's changed, where they expect to be fewer interest rate cuts in the US and less money to flow out of the United States into emerging market economies, then the rand does tend to draw back. So it's not just US dollar strength which has caused the rand to weaken. There's also been other factors at play as well, which have obviously seen sentiment dull somewhat on emerging market currencies, with the rand being one of them. Let's not forget it's also a commodity currency and influenced by commodity prices.
Now, taking all of that into account, we just have to wrap it up really quickly here. Where does Investec then see the rand averaging this year?
So I think, a really important point is we actually see a lot of volatility in the rand. Remember, the rand actually went towards, below 18 rand to the dollar in early December, and of course, is even tried to move towards 17 rand to the US dollar. It's obviously rebounded back quite substantially. Our most important point we would say to you is we still expect to see volatility in the rand. We still expect to see financial markets watching US inflation outcome numbers, for example. But nevertheless, we do think there could be further strength in the rand, and of course, the rand could try and move back to 17.50 and even towards 17. At the same time, obviously, might move towards 18 and 18.50 if we do get very harsh tariff increases in the United States, which really push up inflation. There scupper chances of further US interest rate cuts. So as I said, a wide range and a lot of volatility.
All right, Annabel, thanks so much for your time and just taking us through those insights with connection to the local unit. That was Annabel Bishop, Chief Economist of Investec, with an analysis of and forecast on the rand.